So once again, hi everybody. Thank you for joining us today. And just to give you information about what it is that we're doing with the PRGDA, every week we're going to start a weekly speaker series where we bring you different topics and different types of talks, from things like this, which is more introductory, to game breakdowns, to specific roles in games, and how you do those careers. Just in case, my name is Coraly Rosario. I'm a UX designer at Niantic. I'm also on the board for the PRGDA. And today we have Trinidad with us, who is also at Niantic. She's the head of diversity and inclusion there. Hey. So I guess quick intro about me. Like I mentioned before, I'm a UX designer in games. Been in games for about 6-7 years now. I also worked on apps and web, and before that I was a graphic designer, originally from Puerto Rico, and then moved to California about 8 years ago. And then, yeah, I've just been kind of doing what I love and talking about games and playing games and doing workshops and bringing things like you, like this, and you, Trinidad, so that others can really understand what the game industry is about. And Trinidad, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Trinidad Hermida. I am from Nueva York, born there, raised in California, to an immigrant mother from Colombia, and my father, and he's from Puerto Rico. And I am just honored to be here to talk to you all about my unconventional way into the game industry. My background consists of theology, and human resources and product management, a little bit of everything. I've had a long journey to here, so let's get this party started.
Yeah. So for those that are joining us, this talk, we're going to be covering generally what the game industry is like, and just things that, trying to give you things that you can take away with you, so that when you're talking to other people about games, or you yourself are deciding what you want to do with your career, this can maybe be like a starting point or a jump point into making those decisions. So one of the first things that I actually want to cover is just how much the game industry is worth and how much it's generating, which I feel like back home, and I don't know about you, Trinidad, but at least with my experience, when I first mentioned I wanted to get into games, people were like, why? That doesn't generate a lot of money. You won't be, successful in that or anything. You're just making little games. How about you? How did people react to that?
I came in later on in life, but I can say that when I was younger, it wasn't something that my parents were like, oh yeah, take your education and go and work in games. I've always loved games since I was a child, but it always felt like something that was not accessible, in the sense of not accessible in the knowledge of how it was created, not accessible in the knowledge of where do I start, where do I begin. So I mean, even looking now, 30 years later, we're still having to educate people on how to get access. Mm-hmm. And it's because there's this sense that, if you're going to be successful, you need to be a doctor, a lawyer, someone like a professional in corporate America. And people are now realizing that the game industry is a $1 billion industry, which I'm pretty sure you'll talk a little bit more about.
Yep. And just in case, literally the same thing with me. Like, since high school, I wanted to work in games. I just wasn't too sure exactly what. And when I mentioned it to my parents that I wanted to go to SCAD and learn concept art for games, they were like, So jumping off of what Trinidad said, the video game industry is worth billions. Specifically, last year, the revenue was $120.1 billion. Show this to your parents, please. The game industry is huge, really. Like, it's not just the US, it's in Asia, it's in Europe, it's in Latin America. It's global, you know, and I really feel like it's not going to go away anytime soon. So you guys are going to be okay. The great thing about the game industry also is that a lot of the skills that you have for games can be applied to other fields, and vice versa. So it's not like you have to stay in games if you don't want to, or don't have to stay in another type of field if you don't want to. You can easily transition from both. And all the skill sets that you'll bring in are still going to be valuable for that. And then diving a little bit deeper into just how this breaks down, depending on like different platforms and everything. You know, PC last year was worth in revenue 29.6 billion, console 15.4 billion. And then mobile games, which is what me and Trinidad are working in, and I've been working in specifically for like the last 6 years plus, 8 years almost, yeah, is worth 64.4 billion, which when you think about it, you know, you have games like Candy Crush, you have games like all these casual games, and a lot of people don't really consider them games when they're playing them, but they 100% are, and they're contributing to games as a whole as well. And diving deeper into that, we also have a field where it's augmented reality, VR, XR, MR, where there are a lot of different games and a lot of different experiences that are being added into that revenue for video games. And at least with Niantic, we explore that merging between games and AR as well. Trini, is there anything you'd like to add to this? Maybe?
I just think that it's amazing to see that a lot of companies, when they go into the mobile game space, it is intentional to make money. And I mean, I'm sure Coraly can talk to this when she does her UX talk in the future, but like there's certain things in the game that are specifically to draw you to, it may be a free mobile app, and then eventually they're going to catch you somehow and get you to purchase something. So they're always, even with Candy Crush, it's like, ooh, do you want this new feature, or do you want to change your emoji? I mean, even with you see a lot more mobile, even interactive apps like Snapchat or House Party or some of these other things where or even the games in your mobile phone, like if you have an Apple or Android, there's a free part to most games, but then if you dig deeper, if you want to do a specific emoji, or if you want to change your hair, or if you want to add something, there's always ways to generate revenue, and it's just something to note. Like sometimes we're just oblivious to it, and when you come into this space, you're a little bit more aware, and you're like, oh, okay, I see where, within 24 hours they want you to spend a certain amount of money.
Oh yeah. Like all of that has been designed, and as a UX designer, my job is always to make sure that there's a balance between what the game is, what we want users to experience and enjoy from it, and also making sure that, we're getting paid at the end of the day. And as a user experience designer, I kind of bridge those things. Sometimes in other talks, you might hear me talk about games as a product rather than a game. Because sometimes it is a product. It's something, it's an experience that's being sold to you so that, you pay a little bit a week or whatever. But there are games out there that are just experiences. Maybe you pay once for it and that's it, and you have access to the entire game. And those games are incredibly valid as well, and actually my favorite games are all like that. And some other games are really just about conveying something to the audience, and maybe they might be free. You might see that more with indie games or more interactive games rather than just a game itself.
For example, with Pokemon Go, you can actually reach level 40 and not spend a dime.
Exactly.
Period. But if you are a little bit lazy like me, you might need to spend some money to get more, just a little bit of money, just to major, but I
Yeah.
think that there's just so many opportunities out there.
Yeah, and I do want to like side note that as well. With Niantic, one of our pillars is to make sure that we're never blocking play.
Hmm.
Where we want to make sure that the moment you play our game, you can like easily go through the whole game without ever feeling like, I have to spend $10 to get this thing because it just won't let me keep playing if I don't do it. You know,
Yeah.
and I think that's really, really like interesting and good of this company to be able to do it, to be able to do that. But yeah. And then one last thing I actually wanted to cover that I think, especially back home, like people, the esports scene is definitely like, rising and being emphasized, but it's not quite there yet. But esports is definitely a thing. Uh, if you don't really understand what the hype with esports is, think of it the same way you would watch a baseball game or a football game, a basketball game, any sort of other sport. You, as a spectator, are watching other people that are really good at what they do play through this game and play against each other. On top of that, with a lot of esports and a lot of people that actually show and stream their games, one, you're learning how to be better, you yourself be better playing the game. And sometimes it's more just like almost like watching a movie or watching a show. So everyone consumes it differently, but esports is on the rise. I would not ignore it if I were you. And esports currently, last year, generated about 56.3 million just in ticket revenue. I'm not including like any sort of prizes that were won or any sort of sponsorships or anything like that. Just in tickets, this is what was generated. And I'm going to take a moment real quick to address a question that I'm getting. So Fabiola, she's asking me if I actually went to SCAD. I didn't, well, not unfortunately. I went to the School of Fine Arts, La Escuela de Artes Plásticas in Puerto Rico in Old San Juan, where I got like a really strong foundation in the visual arts. I became a graphic designer, and then I did my master's degree in San Francisco, in video game development specifically, focusing on UI UX. So it took me a few years to get there, but I got there. And that kind of leads us into just this conversation, like, what are the roles that are in video games and how we got in there. I kind of gave like a brief description, but yeah, I was in Puerto Rico, went to Artes Plásticas, was a graphic designer for many years, then moved to San Francisco, did my master's, and I've just been working in video games pretty much about a year or two after I moved to San Francisco, and now I'm in LA with Niantic. And Trinidad, what was your journey like? Because you have a really, really unconventional journey.
My journey was where do I begin? Okay, so I'll start with my degree. I have a degree in theology and a master's in theology. I got it from Gordon Conwell in Boston, Massachusetts. And while I was in school, I was working in the hospitals. I was working in education, and as an executive assistant. And doing that during school sort of helped me to rise up the ranks to being executive assistant for like the office of the president, And so when I was looking for a new job, I got offered a job to work as the executive assistant to the chief diversity officer at EMC. And that was like my entry into corporate America. And I made a lot more money doing that than being a pastor, as you can imagine. And I had opportunities within that role to grow. So going into a program manager role, and then going into product management, and then realizing that I didn't really like product management, like that wasn't my jam. And so after going past D&I role to product, I realized that my heart was in diversity and inclusion. And so I looked for ways to get back into that. And one thing that I think is great is I just applied to the job online. I didn't know anybody. I had no connection. So just imagine that if the gates are open for people who just apply and don't know anybody and they can still get the job, imagine if you know someone or you network or you connect, which I know we're going to talk about later, so I
Mm-hmm.
don't want to go dig deep into, but essentially I applied on LinkedIn, which is another tool that you can use to find some great jobs, and got the role. So that's how I ended up here.
Yeah. Very quickly, can you explain what diversity and inclusion is and what it is that you do in your role?
So, I mean, that's a huge question. Diversity and inclusion. Diversity and inclusion, in layman terms, is finding ways in in corporate, startup, in just in jobs in general, in with employers, to create a space where people can bring their genius and not have to gate who they are or their experiences, and finding ways to break down systematic policies and oppression and different things that have come with the territory of being in America, being in this world for as long as we have, and having the structural things that we do, to break those down and create safe spaces for people to be authentically themselves. I also say it's education. I'm educating leaders, people, on why we walk into places and automatically have a bias, or so helping us recognize our bias, helping us recognize where we're not opening our doors to all people, or we're looking for a specific type of fit, which I think is not even a real thing. It's just what makes us comfortable. So that's just the easy way of saying, like, I like to create spaces and places where people can be safe, do their job well, get recognized for that, and not have to, it's sort of level setting the stages, because a lot of people don't have access. Coraly and I were just talking about how when we were younger, we wanted to get involved. When maybe our white or more privileged counterparts, when they were younger, their parents are like, sure, try it, and gave them access. So you see the game industry being predominantly Asian, white, and not necessarily very diverse. And so this is why I'm here and excited to be talking to you, because we want you to get into the game industry. We want to open doors, and so that's exactly what I do.
Yeah, and that's why we do like things like this as well, just making sure that those resources are out there, because we know, like, when I was growing up, there was nothing. Like, literally the only access I had to other people like me that liked video games as much as I did was my card shops, and that was maybe my comic book shops, and that was kind of it. Like, maybe GameStop, but actually being able to talk to other people that worked in video games, it wasn't until way, 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 way later, when I was much older, that I was finally able to find people, because I just didn't know how. Like, there were no resources for me. There was no one I knew that could teach me. So doing things like this, doing things like diversity and inclusion, just helps us be able to reach out more, and reach out to those communities who have very little, and letting people know, like, this is a thing. Look, let's help you develop the skills that you need in order to get in here, so you don't feel alone in that process. But yeah, so I want to dive into the different types of roles that you can find in video games. And this is really great for people who are still unsure exactly of like what they want to do with their careers, or they kind of like, for example, they like engineering, they like programming, but they kind of also like design and art and all these other things. So there's a bunch of different roles that cover and cross over with different disciplines that are within games, and we can talk about those. First, I do want to talk about like production and product. Usually these are the people that are managing other people on your team. Producers, I put them very high on this list because I love producers. And I literally cannot do my job well without them. They are my time managers. They are making sure that deadlines are being met. They're making sure that we are getting the things that we need to get our job done. on a project. Operation managers is just making sure, again, that the team is getting everything that they need to get the project going. Is there like anyone missing that maybe we need to hire? Is there any sort of tool that maybe we need to like approve a budget for? All that stuff, they kind of handle those things. Project managers are really looking at the vision of the project and making sure that we're going in the right direction. Studio leads is way more high level. It's the person in charge of like making sure that everything that's coming out of the studio makes sense and is on brand for that studio. And then you have your PMs, which are product managers. Similar to project managers, they're making sure that the vision of the product is making sense and the game is making sense. And usually around there is when we start talking about like, well, how do we monetize on this game? What are our strategies for when we come out with the game? They're talking to like a bunch of different people on different teams and different departments. And then you have your game designers or just design in general. And within game design, there's actually sub-branches. You have narrative, you have systems, you have lead game designers, combat, like it just branches into like a whole bunch of like specialties and sub designers. Yeah, I kind of fall a little bit within there depending on what team I'm on. And then you have UX, which is what I do. It's user experience. I work very, very closely with the game designers, with the PMs, with art to make sure that the experience of the game itself, like the entire experience, is just making sense and is usable for our players and our users. You have analysts that are just looking at the data that's coming in when the game goes live, seeing where things might be dropping off and seeing how we can use that data to course correct along the way. Product is very similar, and I think I might have copied it over here, but it's very similar to the product managers, leading the vision of the game, strategizing on how to monetize, if we're going to monetize, strategizing on any sort of user acquisition methods. They do a lot. Product does a lot. Trini, like, what was your experience as a product manager?
Ooh, as a product manager, it's like herding cats. You are essentially the center nucleus of all things that product. So let's just say it's a game. Like this game is coming out. It's either a new version. It's a new version of a game. So it's taking marketing. It's working with design. It's working with finance. It's working with so it depends if it's a hardware or software, but like just all of those different things to tend to a timeline that everybody agrees to deliverables. So essentially you're the check-in person, you're the one who's tapping in to see if everybody is on board, and you're also doing research and checking out to see what your audience, the people who are going to be purchasing this, so you want to make sure you're tapping in with them as well and making sure that you're adhering to some of the things that the community wants. So it's like herding cats. Just a very good cat herder, and making sure that you're good at forecasting and looking at the future and thinking of ways like, okay, let's see how we can get this done. And it's also empowering people with the tools and information they need. So weekly, bi-weekly, as a product manager, you're having meetings where you're just saying the status of things. You're letting people know what's happening. You're informing everybody. So essentially, like, you're like the town gossip. You're like the mayor. You're like the mayor.
Yeah, and some of the product managers I've worked with before, like a lot of the things that they do every day is just looking at data that's coming in from the analysts and from UA as well. And like you said, forecasting, like what is coming up in a month? How can we plan for that thing that's coming up in a month? Are there any sort of special events maybe we can do? And then talking with the team about those events and then having them design and flesh out the features as well. Again, the product managers that I've worked with were like that. And then I know you guys can't see this right now, so I'm going to scroll that over. And you have engineering. And within engineering, there's just a bunch of different things you can do. Oh, sorry about that. And you have your back end engineers, which is just really building the framework. This is doing something weird. Is really building the framework for the game itself, the tools that the designers are going to need. So, and then you have your tech artists, which if you're if you're a person that likes programming, likes the engineering side of things, but you also kind of like really like the art side of things as well, that might be the perfect career for you because you're literally doing both. You are an animator and an art person and a VFX person using engineering and code to make kind of like the artwork within the game, and a lot of optimizing as well in the game. Um, and then and then we have the marketing team, which is just making sure that before the game comes out or while it's out as well, um, our marketing campaigns are being built and making sense for users. So definitely artists are going to be on that team. Any sort of creative services and any sort of like outreach with outsourced teams that we need to do. Your editors and copywriters, making sure that like what you're writing in these campaigns is catchy and is appropriate for certain demographics. Your social media person, just managing all the different social media and where it is that we're posting to the world on Facebook, Twitter, etc. Your brand managers, making sure that the campaign that you are building is within brand, not only with the game itself, but also the studio. And then user acquisition, which is the people who are actually putting together the strategies and the campaigns that you see on Facebook. Whenever you get an ad from Facebook, that sometimes feels a little creepy because it's very well targeted to you. It's like, oh my God, I was just thinking about like, a specific kind of tea, and there it is in Facebook. It's not that these professionals can read your minds. It's just the way that they're able to tune these campaigns on Facebook is pretty on point. Like they do a lot of testing for this. It's a lot of data managing. It's a lot of spreadsheets. So many spreadsheets. And just using the platform tools that are available for them, like Facebook, like Google Ads, I think is the other one, right?
Yeah.
And then we have our C-suite people. It's usually the people that are very, very high level. Your CEOs, CFOs, chief executive officer, just in case, chief financial officer, and chief technical officer. Like they oversee at again, very high level, all the departments within the company itself. Your executive assistants, which are the people that are working alongside the CEO to make sure that they have everything, all the C-suite people, making sure that they have everything that they need. Your studio heads, which I mentioned before briefly, but if it's a company that has a bunch of different studios all over the world, it's making sure that the vision that's coming from the main studio is being met through the games that are being released and within the studio operations as well. And then you have department heads, within a project in a studio. If there are multiple projects being worked on, you might have a department head for engineering or for art or UX. Usually you have a director of UX at some point. Yeah, for all of that. For animation, well, animation falls within art, but yeah. Oops, sorry. And then you have your people team. These are the people that work in the office and make sure that, everything is legal. Your human resources, your D&I, your office managers, and making sure that things are supplied, that people are getting the desks that they need. It goes way beyond that, and I'm being super general about this, but I love office managers. They're the ones that make me feel like, oh yay, I'm loved here. Your lawyers are really important, especially if you're going to do testing, if you're coming up with new ideas, new patents, all of these things. We need lawyers to make sure that we're not copyright infringing on any other IP or brand that's out there. And also accounting, because we need them. We need to count the money. And then there's like another just a bunch of different other people that apply to games. You know, you have your music and sound, esports, broadcasting, any sort of streaming. A lot of companies work together very closely with streamers as well to make sure, kind of like brand advocates almost. Customer ops, customer services, community management, publishing, and localization. And localization is super, super important, making sure, especially if it's a global release, making sure that you are correctly translating things, both written and culturally, to those other countries. And one thing that just kind of like pops up all the time, and people never know how much money they're supposed to be making, but for all of these, you can expect anywhere between 40K and 200K. Again, it depends on the role. And it also varies by location. So with California, you, especially like game hubs, you will be paid more typically. However, you do have to take into consideration that you're also going to be spending more. San Francisco, great example, is very, very, very expensive. And 40K is nothing in San Francisco, really, especially if you want to live in the city. But 40K in Florida or in Puerto Rico, things like that. That's actually a much more, like, you can live off of that pretty well. But it's because the cost of living is a lot less. These ranges also depend on the experience of the person. Obviously, a person that's been, working in games for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, chances are they might be making more money compared to someone who's only been there for a couple of years and are still like mid-level. But yeah, all of this depends. Trinidad, do you have anything that you think maybe you can add to this?
I agree with everything you said. It just depends on your location, and that's a huge factor in your salary. And that's why sometimes if you want to make more money and live in a place that is more affordable, I would lean on remote only roles. So there are some of those in the game industry. There are not a lot of them, but if that's the case, you can find something that would meet your needs.
Yeah, and especially right now. I mean, all of us are remote right now. So, but all of us, I don't know how many studios are hiring still right now. But situations like this, there's definitely companies out there still looking for people, and they're much more willing to remote for the time being, just because they need those heads. Okay, so where can you actually start learning more about the game industry, getting more information, building your resources, all of those things? One of the first things I actually do recommend is going on Twitter and following the game companies that you really love. Doesn't have to be these specifically. Follow Niantic. But just seeing what it is that they're doing with their community outreach, what they're doing with their games, playing their games as well. And if you don't want to play their games, at least watch a few videos and watch other people play so that you can understand what people's experiences are like, players' experiences specifically. What the overall, what is it about this game that is really hooking people into it? That's usually how I approach it. But yeah, follow them on social media. And also follow like a bunch of different people that actually work in games. And sometimes this can be a little difficult to find, but now with Twitter and Instagram, people are a lot more open to saying where they work. And LinkedIn, you can always find people there and find their social medias through there. But people like Ashley. And I just noticed I spelled Ashley's name wrong. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry, Ashley. Forgive me. Ashley Alicea, she's from Puerto Rico as well. She's a games evangelist in Unity. So she actually goes around the world talking about everything that Unity offers, talking about the games that are being made with Unity, talking about the tools, and understanding what the community needs from Unity so that they can build even more awesome things. Like she's great. She's super 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 great, and she's actually making her own like little games as well. Like the last time I saw some of her tweets, she was like building some things. Osama. So Osama, I really love telling people about him because he's all about diversity. He's all about explaining why diversity is so important and representation in the games themselves, making sure that we're not locking ourselves to stereotypes, making sure that we're being authentic with the characters we're presenting and coming up with. Currently, he's a lead game designer at WB. Carla is also from Puerto Rico. She's a concept artist. Mostly, she has like her own studio and kind of does her own thing. But she worked on a lot of the concepts for some of the Marvel games that came out recently. Also, she worked on Doctor Strange. She's worked on Magic the Gathering art. She is amazing. She's from my hometown too. We have Daphne Rose. She's also here at Niantic. She's a senior software engineer on Pigo. And she talks a lot about like just engineering as well. And she's very, I think maybe Trinidad, you know a little bit more about her than I do. Do you want to talk about her?
Oh, I absolutely adore Daphne. Daphne is a feminist. She is a woman of color who has defied the odds and is a senior software engineer. She's worked at Apple. She's worked at other places. And she just brings a different perspective when she's working on products. She can communicate. She's a manager. She's very just lovely to work with. And I'm honored to have met her and work with her. She does a lot of things in the community as well.
Cool. There's Gavin. He works at Wizards of the Coast. He's currently a senior Magic designer and writer there, specifically on the card game itself. He's also incredibly involved, oh my god, with the community. He even cosplays and everything. I whenever I'm up in Seattle, like I always like checking in with him and seeing how he's doing. But yes, Gavin is great. Lots of personality. There's Celia. She is pretty much the person you want to talk to about UX in the game industry. She worked on Fortnite and feel that she led to a lot of its success as well. She established the UX department within the company at Epic, and she wrote a book. She very very like insightful, very anything you want to know about UX. She is 100% the person to go to. Another thing I definitely recommend is downloading the tools to make games and just playing around with it. Even if you're an artist or an animator or someone who typically doesn't like really want to program or anything, it's really important to actually know the tool set that you're working with or your team is working with so that everyone is speaking the same language. It could be Unity, it could be Unreal, it could be any other platform, really. But just getting your hands into it, I really recommend it. If you don't know where to start with programming, Code Academy is free. Some like they don't have C#, which is what at least last time I checked, they don't have C#, which is what Unity tends to use. But if you just want to get like a basic understanding of like programming structure and hierarchy and everything, this is a free resource. It's great. Their classes are very very easy to follow. And I think this is really important right now, given the current situation with COVID and everyone is indoors and sheltering in place. How do you network and how do you see other people that are not, that are in games or want to work in games? Game jams are going to be your thing, especially online game jams. And I know I'm kind of covering it a little bit here. Sorry. But there's a site called Indie Game Jams, and it just kind of covers all the game jams that are coming up within the next few months to a year, sometimes longer. Global Game Jam is every year, and locally there are things that are being worked on, especially on the island. We're restructuring how we're doing our game jams, so keep an eye out for that. Whoops. Universities. On the island itself, I definitely recommend Escuela de Artes Plástica if you are going down more an art route. It will give you a much stronger foundation. If you learn, if you learn the basics. If you just want to go down the video game development path, Atlantic College, I know, is the one that really they have a whole department dedicated to it. And I believe there's some other universities. And if anyone in the chat, like in the comments, wants to go ahead and post exactly what universities those are that are on the island that have now new game development departments or even classes, just go ahead and like put it. I don't know where to point, but put it there and share that with others. Academy of Art University is where I'm from. SCAD has a pretty robust game development, more again on the concept art and art side of things, but they do have classes for video game development. DigiPen is a school dedicated to video game development, and UCLA their game lab is actually one of the top game development departments in the country. There was one more, and I forgot what it was. SCAD. Full Sail. Full Sail is in Florida, and they have programming, concept, a bit of everything, really, and I think animation. Yep, Interamericana de Bayamón. They have a game development course. In Fajardo, in Barranquita, they have programs. Thank you. And let me see. And then networking. And sorry about that. And hey, Trinidad, can you actually talk a little bit about how important networking is?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Networking is super huge, and I love this list here. So if you're looking at the live, like, I'm not, Coraly, are you gonna make this like available somehow? Yes. Okay, so this list right here is something to look at, because once we get out of COVID, which I hope we will eventually, meetups are huge. So you can go on meetup.com, you can search like games or game jams or like
tech, a lot
Latinx in gaming, tech, Black in gaming, like all of those. Mm-hmm. Facebook has a couple of groups. There's a Black in gaming group. There's a Latinx in gaming group. Reddit as well. I mean, everything on this list. Eventbrite. A lot of companies do social networking events, and we're going to list them on Eventbrite. We're going to list them on our Twitter. And I'll tell you this, like, I've met some dope human beings just by following people on Twitter and seeing what they like, following that, and then also just reaching out to them and sliding into their DMs and being like, hey, I'm new to this scene. I appreciate your tweets. If you're ever in the area, or, if you have some people that I should follow, or is there any resources that you want to share? I think as a game industry, especially as the underrepresented minority in game industry, I want to share as much information as I can. So I'm going to freely do that. Discord has a couple of channels. One that I know is the Latinx in gaming one. IG, LinkedIn. Follow us on LinkedIn. Look at what we post. Look at our jobs. See if there's any positions open. And then also consumer game events like PAX, GDC, E3. Obviously this year, PAX South happened by the skin of their chinny chin chin, but everything else has been canceled. So not knowing what the future is going to be like and when's the next time we're going to be able to get that many people in one space, I'm pretty sure a lot of these companies and organizations, ESA, Foundation, all of them are looking at ways to pivot and do more interaction through virtual experiences like Zooms and different things of that nature, Twitch. So guess what that means for us? It means you don't have to have a ticket to get into some of these places like you had to before. I believe like as people start to pivot into the virtual space and doing more webcasts, more lives, more Twitch streams, it's going to be free. Mm-hmm. And what does that mean? If you're interested, you could just be an innocent bystander, click the link and watch and learn. So this is a great time to tap in, get connected, follow us on Twitter, see who we follow, and all those other social media opportunities.
Yep. And one, I guess, last thing I want to add, like when I started in the industry, when I was still like doing my master's degree and everything, the way I networked was actually through volunteering. Like I went to GDC a bunch of years and I just volunteered. And you build a sense of community with other volunteers to the point where everyone's just kind of like looking out for each other. And it's like talking to everyone that they see and like, oh, you're looking for like a programmer? I know a really awesome programmer. Let me like introduce you guys. And that happened to me so many times, especially as a UX designer, because there aren't that many of us in games specifically. Whenever someone heard that they were looking for a UX designer, I would have like people just like rush over to me like, you need to meet this person now. I'm like, whoa, what is going on? And I didn't really have to like do very much. It was just them seeing you as a person, seeing how awesome you are, and wanting to just help each other, like genuinely help each other. And that's been very, very different from other industries I've been in. I've, like you mentioned on Twitter, like reaching out to people and just kind of like poking at them and everything. My sense of the community has always been that like game devs really want to help other game devs a lot. Like, and everyone knows each other too. Like it is a huge industry, but it's also very, very small. So almost everybody knows everybody in video games. But yeah, like reaching out through Twitter, that's like awesome. Like do it. Volunteering is definitely the way I went. And it's a good way to give back to the community as well. Making sure that other people also have access to the same resources you have access to. And the final thing I would say is like making sure you're playing everything, mobile, PC, console, you know, all the realities, and trying different apps and other games that you typically wouldn't like gravitate towards, because there are some excellent designs in there that people are constantly like interacting with that you can adopt into your games, and seeing how they can fit in your games in a way that makes sense. We don't design in vacuums. We have to constantly receive input from a bunch of different things, both physical and digital. So try everything, honestly.
I saw a question in, say what you're going to say.
No, it's okay.
Like, I saw a question about like someone who's about to graduate and looking for a job and what should they do?
Oh, give me a second. Graduate. Okay. Given the current pandemic situation, a lot of people in all kinds of industries are getting laid off from their jobs. First job. Oh, that one's tough. Because even in a good economy, finding a job is actually very difficult for people who just graduated. So for me, one thing that really helped me right before I graduated, I reached out to a lot of my professors and I did a lot of contract work, projects here and there, just kind of like building up my portfolio, building up some experience, so that when I did apply for that first full-time job, like I had stuff like to show that wasn't just student work. Networking is going to help you a lot with that too. I know right now it's very difficult, but everyone is on the same boat as well. So I'm on Slack every day. I'm on Discord every day. I'm on all the social medias because I literally cannot do anything else. I can assure you, almost everyone else is doing the same thing right now, if not playing Animal Crossing.
That part.
Yeah. And really, this is a great opportunity to make those connections just because everyone is living through the same thing or very similar things and very similar emotions. And we are trying to reach for that connection actively or subconsciously as well. So being more active on social media is going to help you a lot. Um, Catering what it is that you're working on to those platforms, those social media platforms, might actually help just a little bit with like reach. So, like in Instagram, one thing that I really like that animators are doing is they'll do snippets of what it is that they're currently working on, and the aesthetic of it and the loop fits perfectly into Instagram. So that when I go into your page, I know exactly what your style is like, and I know exactly what it is that you can do. It's not ArtStation, it's not Vimeo, that's fine, but Instagram has way more reach. Um, and right now, you can probably still find some entry level stuff, but I think right now your best bet might be contract and freelance for a bit until things kind of settle down or get back a little more back to normal.
I plus one the concept, what do you call it, freelance and contract, and also like I know game jams are important because you need art in all games. So if you can get in game jams to help build your portfolio, you can say, oh, we created this, we created that, like, because you want to build that. Obviously, you're in school, so you have a portfolio, but something that some companies look for is they know that when you come out of schools, you project, like most people have the same exact portfolio. You see the same thing. So what is going to make you stand out? What is going to show that you went above and beyond and are just not showing me what you created in school? Like, you're showing me that you volunteered, you did this, you did that. So think outside the box in ways that you can help people with your art.
And for example, on my resume, I actually, when I first started putting my resume together, I actually had volunteering experience on there. Just because, unfortunately, I didn't have a whole lot of experience that applied directly to games. So I kind of had to find ways to make them understand that I am involved in the community. If you have a podcast, if you're involved in any sort of organization, talk to them, maybe add it in there as well. Someone here asked if you had your portfolio ready when I did volunteer work. So the first time I went to GDC, no, I did not. I had no portfolio whatsoever or business cards. Um, I went to GDC because I wanted to figure out if that was something I really wanted, if being in games was something I really wanted. I wanted to understand the people that were there first. Um, that's just me. And I had a blast, and I made so many friends that to this day we're still in contact. And then the following year, my portfolio was ready, and I went to GDC with the specific goal of networking and getting my name out and my portfolio out. But the first time I did volunteering, I didn't have anything. And I don't know if it works similar for you. I know you just like applied to the LinkedIn job request, but I was there like anything you did?
Anything. I think that just in general, like so coming into the industry, not knowing anybody, I will tell you that I hit the ground running. I hit up every nonprofit, every person I could in Latinx in gaming, Blacks in gaming. I did the research, and I just hit them with hey, I'm new to this industry, and I want to learn about your experience and learn about how I can bring some, like, be an asset to everybody. Like, and even at the end of some of those conversations saying, how can I help you? Is there anything that that you need help in that with my skill set I can do to help? And so that way, going before people humbly and like not acting like you know everything, because I really knew nothing, created opportunities for me to meet some of the spearhead and leaders in this industry, like Gordon Bellamy at Gay Gaming. I met all of the leaders over at Blacks in Gaming. I met Chris at Latinx in Gaming, like all these like dope human beings, and I was just like, I would have never met them if I didn't go on Twitter, and ask people who I knew were connected, is there anybody who you would recommend that I follow or reach out to? And I'll say that now I'm a lot more aware, and I have a great network, and I'm blessed. I'm blessed because that's what makes me want to stay in this industry, because now I have a community and I have a family that I know is doing some dope shit, So in that regard, I'm honored.
Yeah. And then kind of there was one point where I just wasn't sure at all, like what it is I wanted to do. Like, was going into games the right course? Was it doing UX? Was that the right course? Like, there was a lot of self doubt. And one thing Gavin actually specifically told me was like, hey, just kind of do the thing. Just do it already. Like, don't be afraid. Don't second guess yourself. Like, if you want this, just, and you can do it, just do it. And that has been kind of like my working motto through through almost everything I've done. I'm an introvert by nature. I actually, before I started getting this involved in games, like public speaking, I hated it. It was like a nightmare for me. But I really, really like teaching. And this motto just kind of helped me through that a little bit. For example, applying for those first jobs, applying for jobs that you think you're not like, that maybe you meet like half the requirements, but not all of them. And just go for it. Again, worst case, they'll say no, but that's okay. You can just move on from there. Let me see what other advice I can give. I don't know.
Well,
Is there anything?
Just to add to that is, I think it's in a similar vein of do the thing, which is and I said this earlier, I don't know if we were on live yet, but considering the state of the world that we're living in right now, we don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. Like, really sit with yourself during this COVID-19 shelter in place, stay at home, and ask yourself, what is my passion? What drives me? What gives me joy? Write those things down and see what you need to invest in order to make those things happen. Mm-hmm. Because tomorrow, we don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. And we need you to be doing what you're passionate about so that we can see that spark, that fire in this place that we're in. Yeah. Like, I really do believe that we all have a place. We all have a purpose. And I think half the battle is figuring out, okay, this is what makes me happy right now. Okay, do it. And utilize your network. Take all of this advice. It takes a lot. At first, I'll say Coraly put this deck together, and she's a boss. But like, the time it takes to put this information together, this is years and years of information. This is learning the hard way. And it's right here at your fingertips. So please don't take advantage. Please take advantage of this. Look at it, go through it, look at the colleges, look at the different ways to network, look at the different companies, add them all, do the work, because we don't know, we might be going to a remote only workforce, and if that's the case, then what's stopping anybody from around the world from working in the game industry?
Exactly.
Nothing, except for access and education and understanding how to navigate that. So my thing to you is do the thing and do what makes you happy and passionate, passionately.
And one final note, I think, is if you don't know what it is that you need to do, ask. Don't be afraid. Don't be embarrassed. Don't feel embarrassed by asking. Again, the game community, like, we want to be able to support each other. We want to be able to give each other resources and make sure that we're all growing, because we want the industry to grow and become better as well for everybody. So if you're unsure about what exactly it is that like you should be doing, reach out to somebody. Really anybody, either in the PRGDA group, on Twitter, Trinidad, Anyone from Latinx and gaming, just be like, hey, like I just graduated. I am a programmer, but like I have no idea what to do or what type of programmer to be or engineer to be. People are going to probably flock to it and just kind of like help build you up. But yeah. And with that, we are done. If you have any lingering questions, please go ahead and write them down in the comments and we'll address them. I think we've addressed everything so far, but if you have anything else, please go for it and we will give you guys a few minutes. And Trinidad, thank you again for being our guest speaker on this and joining me in this
Of course,
first.
I'm honored.
And just in case, our socials, Coraly Rosario. You can find me on Twitter, Corapiki, and then Trinidad, head of diversity and inclusion. You can find her, and this is Trini. And I will be making this deck available on the PRGDA page for anyone that just kind of wants to go through it, download it, use it as a reference or resource. And we might put it on the blog as well, but let me talk to the board about that and see. Yeah, Fabiola says, I believe it's estimated by 2030, 80% of the workforce will be working remotely freelancing. So, yeah, we definitely have to adapt, given everything that's going on. And this is just training for us with the COVID situation.
And
Yeah, no, we don't know how much longer this is going to last. And, hopefully way before the end of the year, we might start be able to be coming back, but we just don't know. It's reliant on too many external factors. So we have to ourselves problem solve our own jobs, problem solve our our communities. How can we shift over to this new paradigm? Um, yeah, we have to build it ourselves. All right, folks. Then with that, I think we're going to go ahead and sign off. Thank you.
thank you so much.
Thank you. And I'll see you later. Bye, everybody.